Hello! Today we are going to start building a platform game together. This is going to be a bit different to the other tutorials because I have no idea what the game is going to look like when it's finished. However, if people like it and people start following along and want to help me decide the path of where to take this, you can leave a comment and let me know. We're going to start off today with the very basics. We're going to build a little character. We're going to draw it together inside the editor. We're going to make it move, we're going to put some platforms down, and we're going to give him a start position in the game, and then we're going to give him an end position in the game, and then at the end of that we're going to decide what we're going to add in next, and we're going to basically build the whole thing together. So open up your construct, editor.construct.net, click new project, and I'm going to call this one, you can call it whatever you want, experimental platformer. It's going to be retro style because I like to make games in a retro style. I'm optimized for pixel art, it's going to be landscape, and I'm going to leave the viewport exactly as it is. Okay, here's the screen. I'm going to leave the layout the same size. I'm going to keep the camera view exactly the same size, and then he's going to obviously move along the level. In fact, we may extend it, we may make it wider, but we'll kind of cross that bridge when we come to it. If you're brand new to Construct, just follow along. I'm sure you'll pick a few things up as we go. Just in terms of the basic interface, you've got your project window over on the right. Your layouts, they're effectively levels. So layout 1 could be level 1. You could create multiple layouts, menu layouts, windscreen, game over layouts, whatever it might be, inventory, whatever. We'll do that as we go along. And then each layout needs to have an event sheet. They don't all need to have their individual event sheets. An event sheet is effectively where you put the code for each level. So you could have a level with its own event sheet, or you could have multiple levels all sharing the same event sheet. And then there is no right or wrong really, it just depends on the type of game you're building as to how you would put that together. And then you've got all your folders down the side where you can store your assets and your sounds and everything. You've got your layers. We'll be using multiple layers, so if you're using the free version, I think you get a limited amount of layers that you can use. The paid version is not that expensive and it does give you a lot more scope to be able to build bigger and better games. And then on the left hand side of the screen you get your properties, which we'll go through as and when we need to. If we went through every single one line by line now, you'd forget most of them by the time we started building any game. So the first thing we need to do is add a sprite. We need to add a player and we need to add a platform. So you double click, you get your object window come up, and then you can choose all of these things. You don't need to know anything in here right now if you're new to the game. All you need to do is find the one that says sprite. You can search for it up here. If you can't find it, double click it, and then just click anywhere in the white, and that'll give you the editor. Click on the two little arrows here. We're going to resize this. We're going to do 16 by 16. If your background isn't dark, you can hold Control B and you can change it from light to dark, depending on obviously the color that you're designing with. You may need a lighter one or a darker one. For now, we're going to go black. I'm going to use the line tool here. We're going to do thickness of 1, opacity of 1, don't check smooth, and I'm just going to draw a square. I know you can use the square polygon tool here. Give it a color, anything you like, and then close it. And that's going to be our player. So we're going to go over here to the name up in the top left, and for naming conventions, it's a good idea to get in the right habit of just naming everything consistently so you can find it. So I'm just going to say SPR underscore player. And that's it. Now we've got our player, we need him to walk around on something. So if you double click again, for this one I'm going to use a tiled background. You could use another sprite if you wanted to, personal preference to some degree. I'm going to click on this. What the tile background does is it enables you to draw one thing, and then it will tile horizontally or vertically depending on what you need. So let's just give it a nice green color. I'm going to give it a border because I like to give things borders. You don't have to give it a border. We're going to obviously change all this artwork as we go along, and this will just kind of be placeholders at the moment. and we can assign collisions to them. So it's not going to be the actual art. We can go into that later on in the tutorial series if we want to. We can go into the whole tile maps. I can show you how to build those. You can actually build them right inside the editor here. I do use Pixel Edit and the Sprite, but you can, if you don't want those software programs, you can literally build everything right here inside Construct, which is quite nice. What we've got going on at the moment is we can pretty much put this anywhere if we drag and drop, but I don't want that to happen. So what I want to do is I want to show the grid, and I want to snap it to the grid. And at the moment, we're snapping it to a grid size of 32 by 32. So you can drop that down. You can make it literally any grid size you want. But because our sprites are 16 by 16, I'm going to change that to 16 by 16. And now it will just snap nicely in place. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to drag it right down to the bottom here, because this camera here, this is going to move basically depending on where our player is. So I'm going to drag that all the way along. I'm going to bring the player down. And now we need to assign some behaviors. We need to put some code in place to make sure that this character can move along this platform. Because if we play it right now, we're not going to see anything because this camera is just fixed in at this top left-hand corner. It's not moving anywhere. It doesn't know where to go. It's just going to sit there and just show a blank white screen. Or black, because we've got nothing in there. And that's pretty much our game, or white. So what we're going to do is we want to click on the player here, and we want to give him a new behavior down here. So add a behavior. There's a few things we need to add. First of all, we need to add platform behavior. This is going to enable you to move him around using the arrow keys. And we also want to add, for now, the scroll to behavior. We may well add this to a separate camera sprite later, so we can play around with the fluidity of the camera movement and make it a little less rigid. But for now, just to get us started, we can hit scroll to. And let's leave it at that. Click on the tile background. Let's give it a new name. For my tile backgrounds, I like to call them TB and then a name. I'm just going to call this ground. We're going to give it a behavior. In order to stop the player falling through it, it needs to be solid. So we can give it a solid behavior. And now, when we hit play, the camera should find the player and follow it around. And you should be able to move just using the arrow keys. Yep. So you can see he's moving along, and when he gets to the edge of the screen, he stops. Nothing at the moment is stopping us fall off the edge. So if we fall off the edge, we're gone. But we've got our basic functionality and our movement in place. What we could add, if you click on the player and add behavior, we could add a wrap behavior. And what this will do, it means that when he goes off the screen to the left, it'll automatically come around on the right, and so on and so forth the other way. So if we test out the game, I'm going to make it a little bit bigger. If we go left, he'll come onto the right. And if we go right, it comes back onto the left. And you can jump. Whoa, that's a high jump. Pushing the up arrow key. So let's just fix that. I don't like those jumps to be quite so high. So on the left, in the properties window here, if you click on the player, you can adjust all of these different behaviors that we've given him. So the behavior, the platform behavior, you can adjust the speed, the acceleration, so how quickly he reaches the maximum speed, how quickly he decelerates. So if you wanted him to come to a skid, if we drop that down to 200, and now when we try and slow down, he keeps sliding. So if, for example, you're walking on ice, that could be a really nice way to implement that. Again, you can change all of these in-game based on what the character's interacting with and based on the button inputs of the player as well. So you get quite a lot of control, a lot of freedom, and it's really quite simple. Let's change the jump to 300. You can check here a double jump, but I don't really like to put that in from the start. Gravity, maximum force speed. You can leave the same. Default controls we're going to uncheck because we don't want people running around with the arrow keys. One thing I really hate when playing games, especially game jam games, is if the player character uses the arrow keys. Just because I'm right-handed, I feel that using the WASD keys is much more intuitive for me. So let's put that in right now. So uncheck the default controls, click over to the event sheet, and we're going to add a first event. No, we're not. We're going to go back to layer 1. We're going to add in a keyboard. So everything you want to be able to use, everything you want the player to be able to use, needs to be an object in the game. So now will be a good time actually to create some organization in the folder. So click over on the objects folder, right click on that and add a new subfolder, and we're going to call this inputs. Right click on the objects folder, We're going to call this sprites. Click on the two sprites that we've got there. You can hold down Shift to multi-select and then just drag them into the sprites folder. And then go back to the game, double click anywhere, and we're going to add in a keyboard. So scroll down to input, double click on keyboard, and I'm going to drag that into inputs, just so it's all nicely set in the project window. Now we can go to the event sheet. Add event. I'm going to add inputs, keyboard. On key pressed, so when the player presses a certain key for the first time, that's what we want. You can do on key is down, but that's going to do it every single time, every single frame of the game that the key is down. And then on key press is when we press it for the first time. So this was what we will be using for jump, and these are what we're going to be using for left and right. So if we go is key is down, click to choose key, and then press any key. I want to press A. And then if you click in here, you can select part of the code that you put in. If you click here on the outside, you can select the whole thing. So if you click here right on the left and then push Control C, Control V, you'll paste it again. And then if we double click here on the A, we can now change that to D. And now we can move left and move right based on A and D. So when the A key is down, we need to add an action. So what do we want to happen when we're pressing A? Well, we need to go to the sprite and we need the player, and if you scroll down to the platform behavior, we want him to simulate a control, and we want him to simulate moving left. And again, if you right click, you can copy and paste, or if you hold down Control or Command on the Mac, which is what I like to do, it's a much quicker way of doing it. Hold down Control, you can drag out a copy of that, double click it, and then click right. So when the A key is down, we want to simulate the player moving left. When the D key is down, we want to simulate the player moving right. Now we want to do the jump. So inputs, keyboard, on key pressed, and jump I'm going to make W because that just feels much more intuitive to me. Then we can copy this down. We want the player to simulate jump. And they're going to simulate all of that based on the inputs that we have over here in the platform properties. Let's change the speed while we're here. I don't like that. Let's go 150. So now, when we play the game, we can use the WASD keys to move around, and we can jump with the W key. Nice, that's great. Right, now let's give him something to jump on. Let's make the jump a little higher first. Let's make the jump 450. Now, click on the tile background. So we've got it selected here. Hold down Control or Command and just drag out a copy. And then we can shorten it. Put one there. Put another one there. Let's put one up here. Let's make it a little bit trickier to make these jumps. Another one there. One there. So then what I can do is I'll make the background, the ground, have a great big hole in it. So we have to climb over here to get to the end. Maybe that's a little too small. Make them 2s. Make that 2s, or make that a 3. I don't know. I like symmetry. And then we'll put that one in there, which is a 2. And then the end of the level will be there. Yeah, let's not. I mean, it's the first level. Let's not make it too challenging. We'll put a hole there. So there's only one really dangerous jump that the player must make, and then we'll go down there. So let's test that out. Hit the play button. See if we can make those jumps. Up there, up there. You drop down, and then he gets to the end. And we can go back. If we go wrap, it goes to the other side. And if we fall, we go straight to the middle. Oh, but we're wrapping. So we can fix that. So now we need a way for the player to die and a way for the player to win, and then we'll leave it there, and then we'll see where we want to take this in the next video. So what we need now is for the player to die when he falls through this gap, and at the moment we've got a wrap. So what we need is a sprite that's going to act as a collision detector. So we've gone to the new object menu window, just double click to get that up, double click on sprite, click anywhere. For this one I'm going to choose purple for all of my collisions so they're all the same color. You don't need to resize it, just click on that, it's going to be nice and big, and you can just shrink this down. Let's just pop that there. So as soon as he hits that, he's going to be destroyed and put back to the beginning. Right, so we're going to rename this now SPR because it's a sprite underscore collision death. That seems like a very suitable name. So we're going to basically say if the player touches this collision death box, then the player is going to be destroyed and restarted back over there. So let's create a little spawning point for him to restart the level. So what we'll do is we'll double click again, we're going to add a sprite, click anywhere, we're going to resize it. Let's resize it down to 8 by 8, nice and small, give it that purple color, drag it over here just above where the player is, and we're going to call it SPR underscore start. So now we need to put that into the event sheet so that the game knows what to do if those things happen. So we're going to go over here, let's create an event, and let's say sprites player. If you scroll down, we can say on collision with another object, and then if we select the death, then we can put in what we want to happen when that happens. So if the player touches this sprite here, the first thing we want to do, let's go to sprites, we're going to go player, we want to go destroy, so we're going to destroy the player. Then we don't immediately want to go straight back, because that's one thing I don't like in games, and game jam games, sometimes we get this wrong, is immediately when you die you're instantly put back, and it can feel a little bit jolty, a little bit quick, and it can be a bit disorientating. So what I want to do is I want to add a wait. So if you go to system, I want the system to wait before we respawn. Now this will give us an opportunity to play like a little clip of music to signify that the player's death or died, or maybe a particle effect or a fade or something like that. So we're going to wait for 1 second after we destroy him, and then we're going to go sprite start. So we're going to click on, we want this this object now, we want this to spawn another object. So we want it to spawn the player after that 1 second wait. So the object we're going to spawn is the player on layer 0, because that's the only layer that we have right now, and image point 0, you can leave all of that the same. The image point, if you click on here, double click on the sprite, you see this little target looking thing over here, that's the image point. You can have multiple ones of these, and we may get into that later. At the moment it's right in the middle, and that's absolutely fine. That's where the player will spawn when we die. So now if we go back to the event sheet, if we collide with this, you're going to destroy the player, you're going to wait 1 second, and then you're going to respawn him. So let's see if that works. Perfect. Now we fall off, death music, restart. Fall off, death music, restart. Now the only problem we've got now is we can see these objects, which obviously we don't want to see. So click on it, scroll down here where it says on the left hand side in properties, initially visible, uncheck it. And then for this one, initially visible, uncheck it. And then if we play the game, you won't see that object. Gone. You just pop in. What I think would be nice actually, when the player starts, let's start the player on the floor. Let's double click him. Double click in the player. Let's set the image point to the bottom. So the way to do this is you can right click it, quick assign, bottom, pops it down there, and that's basically where the collision will take effect from. So when we snap it to the grid, it will snap directly on top of there. So I don't want him to drop in when we first start. When we first start, I just want him to be stood there on the ground, and then when we die, then I want him to kind of drop in from the top. But what I want to happen when he drops in is, I think it would be quite nice, and again, we'll polish all of this up as we go through the game. a nice little particle effect that kind of happens just to signify that, yeah, we've kind of pinged into reality and we've dropped in. So if you double click anywhere in the game, we can scroll down and we can just add under the general category, we can add the particles, click anywhere in the game, and let's resize this. We're going to bring this down to 5 by 5, so nice and tiny, and then our play is blue, so it doesn't have to match up exactly. I mean, if you really want it to, it can do, but I'm just going to pop it in blue. And then what I also like to do is get the pencil tool and go a slightly lighter shade of blue. And I just like to kind of pop in a few extra ones just to make it, doesn't have to be exactly even, it just gives it a little bit more variety when looking at it. Now we've got this particle effect here. Over on the left hand side you can see under properties for the particle effect, you can see the rate, which is effectively how many of these little things there are. The spray cone, which is a degree of which way this is going to spray out continuous. If we preview it now, you can see that it just sprays out at 60 degrees. If I do 360, it goes out all different directions, which is what we want. We don't want a continuous spray because it's not going to be continuous. It's going to be like one kind of puff of particles just to signify that he's respawned. So we do it as one shot. You can see, yeah, they come out there. Let's leave the rate at 50. The size at the moment, each individual particle is 32 pixels. We don't want that. We made it 5, so hit 5. They go out quite far. We don't really need them to go out that far, so we can bring the speed down by half. And you can see they go out and then suck back in again. That's quite a nice effect. The reason it's doing that is because we've got the acceleration to -150. If we put that back to 0, they wouldn't come back. Just go out continuously. Let's not fade them to invisible. Let's timeout expire. So this basically tells you how to destroy the particles. So after 1 second at the moment, they were fading to invisible. I don't like 1 second. Let's put in half a second. I think it's better. And then instead of fade to invisible, timeout expired. So at the end of timeout, at the end of the 0.5 seconds, they just disappear. There. I don't know, maybe I don't like that. Timeout expire, 0.5 seconds. Let's put it back to 1. No, maybe I do like them at fade. Let's fade them out at 0.5. Yeah, that's better. We don't need in the game, but we do need it somewhere in the layout. What we will do later is probably create a separate layout just for all the objects, because they do need to be on a layout, somewhere in the game in order for the system to recognize them. So at the moment we're just going to leave it down there, and then again with the naming convention, we're just going to call it PAR, the particles underscore respawn. So now when we go back to the event sheet, when the player dies, we want him to destroy. We want to wait 1 second, and then we want the sprite start to respawn the player, but we also want the start sprite to spawn the particles at the same time. So spawn on another object, particles respawn exactly in the same place. We'll have that before it respawns the player. It's going to be negligible in terms of speed, so it doesn't really make a difference, but I just like to look at it and go, right, that happens, that happens, that happens. So now we go to the layout, hit play, wait for it to load, and then fall off, bang, away we go. And again, we can tidy all that up later, but the functionality is there. Back to the beginning, over we go again, drop down, and now we just need a way for the player to win. So let's go over to layouts, right click, we're going to add a layout. We're just going to add a layout only. We're going to call it layout 2. Again, we'll change the name of these as we go. Layout 2 is just going to be a windscreen. So for this one, I don't need it to be a full layer. We're not going to scroll around. It's just going to be a title that says level 1 complete, and then have a few stats on it, and then a button that says go to level 2. So we can make the whole layout the size of this viewport, which is what we're going to do. So at the moment, the size is 640 by 360. If you click down on here under project properties and click view, you can see that the viewport size, which is this window here, is 320 by 180. If you click over here, we can now change this to 320 by 180, and now it's exactly the same size. And then for now, all we're going to do is double click. We're going to add a text, which again, we will find nice new fancy fonts for later and change them all over. But for now, I'm going to click and we're going to say, you win. And that's it. And we're going to add stats, we're going to add collectibles, we're going to add pickups, we can do all of that good stuff. As we build the game, let's center justify it and center justify it. And show grid, snap to grid, and then we'll snap it right to the middle. I think we'll just leave it at Arial because we're going to change that font later. We can change it to black, that's not an issue. Fine, let's leave that there. Layout, it doesn't need one, it will need one eventually, but for now we don't need to because we're not going to, in fact actually, do you know what, let's put eventually one, and then let's go back here and we'll add a button that says click, but we'll then send the player back to the beginning of level 1 for now, just so we can create a loop, so you can play, restart, play, restart, so it doesn't just end and there's nowhere to go. So if we go back to the event sheet now, sorry, the layer now. Now we need a collision, like we do here and here, that says when we touch this, the level ends. And again, we can just put it in as a collision now. We'll obviously make something nice and arty with the editor that signifies the end of the level, or maybe like a signpost or something. I don't know. We'll see how we go. We can decide. We can build it together. If this video generates any interest at all, we'll just go from there. So let's go sprite. I'm going to use that purple color that I always use. Pop that in there. Put it there, could be like a door or a portal. Just change the origin to the bottom. Instead of right clicking over here, you can just push, if you've got a number pad on your keyboard, you just push number 2. It goes straight to the bottom, otherwise you can do it the other way. Pop that there, and we're going to call this SPR_exit. As we build multiple levels, we can reuse the same sprites, but we'll need to add instance variables so that we know which one we're colliding with. But again, don't worry about that right now. We're just building some functionality in, and we'll just evolve it as we go. Go back to the event sheet. We're going to say player on collision again, so we're going to find the player which is in the sprites, and we need to tidy this up, which we will do before we finish. Player on collision with another object, exit. So when the player touches the exit, what do we want to do with the player? Well, let's destroy the player because we don't need him anymore. We can respawn him in at the beginning of the next level. Let's call that particle effect so it looks really nice. So we can click on it, hold down Control or Command and just drag it down. So we're going to destroy him, but the start sprite doesn't want to spawn that. We want to go back. If you double click on it here, once you drag it down, double click on it, go back. Instead of this sprite spawning that particle effect, we want the player to spawn it. So we click on the player, spawn another object, next, particle respawn. It doesn't matter, we can just use the same one. We can maybe add a different one in later, but we want to do that before we destroy the player. So we want to spawn it and then destroy, so it looks like he's just destroying into a kind of puff of smoke and then moving on to the next level. So once we've done that, again, I like to add a short wait. I don't like things to happen instantly. So scroll down under System, double click on wait 1 second, and then we're going to go to the next level. And again, we can add transitions in like fade outs or kind of wipes with kind of black overlay and make it all fancy later, but there's no point doing that now. We'll just put in the basic mechanics together. So add an action, go to System, scroll down to go to layout, and then we can from the drop down menu select layout 2, which we can rename, give it a better name later, and that's it. Once we've done that, it's going to wait, it's going to take us to level 2, and level 2 is going to say you win, and we're going to need to add a button which brings us back, which effectively will be the same code that we've got here. So let's go to layout 2, which again uses the same event sheet 1, so it can all go just in that one thing. There is a button that you can use. I'll show you on here. There's a button. I don't use them because they look ugly as hell. They look like UI buttons for like, I don't know, like a spreadsheet or something a little bit more corporate looking. I don't like them. I deleted it. It says you've deleted the last button. I also like to go into my hierarchy here and just delete it if I'm not going to use it, just to keep things tidy. Let's use a sprite instead. Just double click. Let's add a sprite. Click, we'll make this one slightly more fancy. So because we're using a 16 by 16 grid, I like to try and keep everything within those kind of parameters. So the width, I'll do 32, which is double, and for the height, I'll just keep it at 16. And we'll click OK. Click the paint bucket, pick any color you like. I'm going to go with green. I'm going to click that there, and I'm going to add a border, which is not black. I'm going to go very dark green. Add it around the top using the line tool. And then at the top, I'm going to give it a slight highlight. So we're going to go a nice light color green, put it across there. At the bottom, I'm going to give it a shadow. And this is so basic. We can go into pixel art and things later, but for now, just to give it a little bit more texture. And what I also like to do is I like to make the top lines a slightly less darker color green, like that. And the bottom color is a slightly darker green. Just gives it a little bit more form. And there is our button. Because this is going to be a button, I'm going to call it btn underscore next level. And again, we can give these instance variables so we know which one we're using as we go through, so we don't have to create new ones all the time. And now we want some more text. Because we're not using this for anything in particular, let's rename it. I'll let the call text txt underscore uin. I can hold down Command or Control and drag out a copy. And then I could just change the text on there. Let's not worry about that. Just double click in there and then just click. Let's just put continue. For now, we can resize this down to 8, make it white. Click on the color down here in the properties, made it white. Shrink it down. Oh, it's on 32. Let's just make it 8 by 8. I don't want to show the grid. There we go. Continue. Let's make it even smaller. 4 maybe. There we go. Okay, I can worry about the snapping later. There we go. That's not too bad. Continue. What we will notice if we play this is the text is going to look a little pixelated just because of the size. So the way to fix that, to go into View, and then on full screen quality, let's just click high. And that should fix it. There you go. It looks much cleaner. Right, what we'll do is we'll just move that text up slightly, double click into the button. On the bottom here, let's right click on the button and just duplicate it. And what I want to do is I just want to show that when you click it, it looks like it's going in. So use the eyedropper tool here, just click that green. Just get rid of the shadows here. Eyedropper tool, click the darker shadow, then just draw a line along the top and to the sides. It looks like it's being pushed in. So double click it again. Before we come out of here, go back into here, click on animation 1, set the speed to 0 so it doesn't play. And then we'll get the continue text, we'll pop it on top, and now we can code that in so we know what happens. But as we did with the keyboard, we're going to need to double click, and we're going to need to add the mouse because at the moment the system doesn't know that there's a mouse in the game. So let's add the mouse. We can drag that into inputs while we're over here. Let's drag all the other things into sprites, and then let's create another subfolder called text, and we'll just drag that into there. Keeps it all nice and tidy. Back to the event sheet, add an event, inputs, mouse. On object clicked, so we want to know if we're clicking an object in the game. On object clicked, on mouse button and left click, clicked. You can choose double click, but we're going to go clicked. We're going to choose the object we want the system to recognize, and that's going to be the button at next level. So when we click this button, what do we want to happen? Well, first of all, we want the button to show frame 1. Starts on 0, frame 1 is the second frame. And then the action, we want to go to layout, layout 1, back to level 1. And that should be that. Let's try it out. We're in game. We're going to jump over the big hole in the ground. We destroy, we go you in, click on that, back. Okay, so the only thing that's the issue here is because we immediately go back, we don't see the button animation changing. We can address that in a future tutorial, but for now let's leave it there. We need to decide a few things about how this is going to continue. If you want to see more, if you want to see how this whole thing plays out, let me know. What do you think we should do? What should the sprite be? What should the character be? Nothing too complicated. I'm thinking maybe a square with legs that we can easily animate. I'm thinking maybe something to collect. Maybe we have to collect a certain amount of things for the exit to reveal itself. Maybe we need to put some traps in. Maybe we need to put some enemies in, some projectiles. Can we pick up a gun? Is there going to be a melee attack? All of these things we can think of, and we need to decide before we start building more levels, because obviously we need to be able to scale that up. Alright, that's it. Thanks for watching. If you want to see more, click a like, leave a comment, and I'll happily make more, and we'll see how far we can take this little platform game and what level of polish we can put on it, and we'll see where we go. Thanks very much. Bye bye.